episode of Tension Not series of Amaya Productions. Before we start our 9th episode, as usual, we are going to say a small sweet prayer.
वदनी कवळ घेता नाम घ्या श्री हरीचे सहज हवन होते नाम घेता फुकाचे जीवन करी जीवित्वा अन्न हे पूर्ण ब्रह्म उदर भरण नोहे जाणीजे यज्ञ कर्म.
Students, you must have wondered why have I chosen this particular prayer written by Ramdas Swami. I know that the words which are used in this prayer are a bit old-fashioned, so you must not have followed the meaning of the prayer. Let me give you the meaning and then you are going to appreciate that prayer. You know, children, what the Swami says? The Swami says that whenever you are having food, thank God for giving that food. Because that food is Anna Brahma, Purna Brahma, means like God. Because it is going to give you energy for your life processes. He is calling food, eating of food, as home. In home, that is yajna. How urja, energy comes out in the form of heat and light? Like that, when the food taken by us is oxidized, then energy is released. And this energy is useful for us for carrying all the activities. Our today's topic is food and the energy released from that food. That's why I chose this particular prayer purposely to tell you the importance of not only the food but the oxygen that we are taking in through respiration. Students, now let us perform a small experiment which we have performed in lower standards. Now this is just to brush up our memory. Here is a small container having wax in it, and dipped inside the wax there is this wick, that is vat in Marathi. Now what am I going to do? I am going to ignite this wick. Right? Now, this wick is burning till it is getting supply of oxygen from the air. But the minute I put this container on top of this wick in this fashion, let us see what happens. There! Oxygen inside is over, so naturally the fire is extinguished. That means for any organic substance to burn and to produce energy in the form of heat, we require two things: organic substrate plus oxygen. So oxidation of organic substrate has to take place before the energy production occurs. We know that in our body we have got food. and the energy is trapped inside the food. We want to release the energy for our various activities. For example, just now I am talking, so that requires release and expenditure of energy on my part. So this food has trapped energy inside, and the energy will be released only when oxidation of food takes place. So that means food is also required and oxygen is also required. Food, we know that it is going to come from our digestive system. And oxygen is going to come from respiratory system. That means these two systems are working hand in hand, that is in coordination, for the energy release from the food. So these two systems, when they work together, then release of energy will occur. Easy, isn't it? Now children, up till now, we have covered the meaning of nutrients in the food. Nutrients in the food are of following types. Number 1 is carbohydrate. Number 2 is proteins. Number 3 is fats, right you are? Or lipids. Number 4 is minerals. क्षार in Marathi. Number 5 is vitamins. And number 6 is water. All this we have covered in lower standards. It was just brushing up of our memory, right? Now why have I included water here? Because our body is composed of more than 70% of water. And without water, enzymatic processes cannot take place. So let the water also be included in the nutrients. The nutrients are also called as constituents of food. Now, if you see veg thali or non-veg thali of any Indian household, then you are going to find all these nutrients in that thali. So now we come on the next one, the balanced diet, which we have again completed in our lower standard, but let us brush it up now. Now what is a balanced diet? First of all, let me tell you children, the balanced diet or the diet which is balanced for me may not be balanced for a laborer who is working and toiling on the streets. Why? Because he is consuming more energy while I am doing a sedentary job, sitting job. So all those people who are doing sitting jobs, they are going to have less requirement of food as compared to the laborers who are doing physical work. So balanced diet for one may not be balanced for another one. Correct? Then what is a balanced diet? Balanced diet should have all these nutrients or all these constituents in the diet in right proportion plus in right amounts. For example, if I give balanced diet which is meant for me to a laborer, that quantity is not sufficient for him. So that is not a balanced diet for him. So there are group of people called as dietitians whose main job is to work out on the balanced diet of their patients, looking at the energy consumed by them every day. So here I am going to write only two things. Number one, balanced diet has all nutrients in right proportion and balanced diet has all nutrients which are in the required amounts. So what is the meaning of required amounts? And what is the meaning of right proportion? Let us come back on this. These first three nutrients, carbohydrates, proteins and fats or lipids, they are required in large quantities. And hence, these three are called as macronutrients. Macro means big. Big amount में वो लेना चाहिए. And vitamins and minerals, they are required in smaller amount. So they are micro, means छोटा nutrients, जो छोटे amount में required है. Now Prashant.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me, how much water do you drink every day?
Around 10 glass of water.
Very good. At minimum 10 glasses of water is required. So if at all I have to put water in macronutrient and micronutrient, then I will be putting it in macronutrients. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. Students, we have covered nutrients or constituents of food, right? And while covering, I said that some constituents come as macronutrients which are required by our body in large quantities. Macro means large quantities. And some constituents are called as micronutrients. Micro means they are required by the body but in very small quantities. Now let us cover the major macronutrients. Here we are. this is a potato and it comes under carbohydrates. We know that because we have been doing this right from our 5th standard onwards. So we say that potato, they have carbohydrates in them. Then we come on pulses. Pulses, we know that they are the macronutrients required in large quantity, and they are going to produce us vegetable source of proteins. And here are the eggs. These are again going to provide us proteins from animal world. Now, all these substances, they come in macronutrients. Carbohydrates, proteins and lipids, which I haven't shown you as yet, but they also come in oil, butter, they also come under macronutrients. Under macronutrients, minerals and vitamins will come. Now when I say that potato is a carbohydrate, comes under carbohydrate, does it mean that it contains only carbohydrate? No. It contains more or less all the nutrients of food. But in potato, carbohydrate portion is more. And hence we say that potato comes under carbohydrate. Now let us jump on eggs. In eggs, you know that there are two varieties, vegetable eggs and non-veg eggs. What is the difference between them? That we will deal with it when we come on reproductive system. Just now remember that nowadays they are telling us that eating eggs doesn't mean that you have turned into a non-vegetarian. Some eggs are vegetarian eggs also. And they are telling the uses of eating egg on our television channel. Every day they are playing that advertisement. You must have heard that advertisement. Sunday ho ya Monday, रोज खाओ अंडे, because it is a storehouse of all nutrients. So children, for good growth, for good intelligence, don't forget to eat single egg every day at least. So eggs are beneficial for our health, and hence I have selected a song on egg for our musical recreation. So let us have that musical break and let us sing the song on egg. Come on.
अंडा 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 आओ सिखाऊं तुम्हें अंडे का फंडा, ये नहीं प्यारे कोई मामूली बंदा, इसमें छिपा है जीवन का फलसफा, इसमें छिपा है जीवन का फलसफा। अंडे में अंडा, फंडे में फंडा, अंडे का अंडा, फंडे का फंडा। अंडा अगर न होता तो मुर्गियां न होती।
question. Here we go. Oh no, something is wrong with this pen. Jayesh beta,
Yes, madam.
will you please do me a favor? See, when you come tomorrow, no, while coming, you buy one black marker pen for me. Can you do it better?
Yes, madam.
Very good. See, I am giving you 100 rupees note and one check of 100 rupees. Whichever he accepts, that Anand bookstall, that small shop is there, no?
Yes.
Whichever he accepts, that you give him.
पण मॅडम छोट्या दुकानामध्ये चेक एक्सेप्ट नाही करणार तो, तर मला तुम्ही कॅशच द्या.
Right. This is the answer I wanted from you, Jayesh. Because just now we are going to study the difference between direct currency and indirect currency. See this note, with the help of this note, you can buy anything on the street, right? You can buy Chinese bhel, you can buy rubber, you can buy pen, etc. So this is called as direct currency. Direct currency means cash. Now this check, I have got that money in the bank, but this check small shopkeepers will not accept. So this has to be turned into cash first, and hence checks are called as indirect currency. Correct? Now, I have got some bank balance also. That is bank deposit. So, a person can have bank deposit, then the person can have direct currency in the form of cash, and the same person can have indirect currency in form of checks. Now when we come on food chapter, students, please remember that glucose is like bank deposit. So glucose in our body is like bank deposit. But it has to be converted first into cash, called as ATP. ATP molecules can release energy in 1 second, and there are indirect currency like checks in our pocket. Like that, we have got NADH2 molecules, FADH2 molecules in our body, which have to be converted first into direct currency, that is ATP molecules, and ATP molecules are going to give us instant energy. So have you followed, Jayesh?
Yes,
the
ma'am.
meaning of bank deposit in the form of glucose in our body?
Yes, ma'am.
Very nice, no?
Yeah.
Now, we will have to study this particular part in detail, because a very important separate question of 2 marks can be asked on the structure of ATP or the significance and function of ATP. I'm sure you want to know that in detail. The minute I say it is very important for exam, then immediately you become alert. So come with me in the next classroom. We are going to see the structure and functions of ATP molecules. Come on. Students, let us cover that very important node on ATP. Now this node has to be given in these 5 points. And it is very easy to remember. Let us see. In the first point, we are going to write the full form of ATP. ATP means adenosine triphosphate. In the second point, we will be writing that it is direct currency as far as energy part is concerned. In the third point, we will be giving the chemical structure of ATP. Look at this. This particular part represents adenine, which is a nitrogenous compound. This particular part represents ribose, which is a pentose sugar. And attached to this ribose, we have got 3 inorganic phosphate groups joined with one another with phosphate back bonds having energy. Now, this particular part, adenine plus ribose, this part makes adenosine, and the 3 inorganic phosphate groups, they represent triphosphate in our name. Now let us come on the fourth point. This energy-rich bond between inorganic phosphate, when it breaks, then there is release of energy. In this fourth point, we are going to give in short how the energy is released. ATP में से energy निकालो, that is minus करो. What do we get? ADP, that is adenosine diphosphate, and 1 inorganic phosphate group. Now what has happened here is can be represented like this. This energy-rich bond is broken. So now what we have got is only this part, remaining part. That means how many phosphate groups are there? 1 and 2. That is why ATP, previous ATP molecule, after breakage of this bond, has turned into ADP, adenosine diphosphate. Di means 2. So only 2 phosphate groups will remain, and 1 phosphate group is removed from that combination. Now let us come on the 5th point. In the 5th point, we will say that therefore, this is the sign for so or therefore, ATP is called as charged battery, and ADP, that is after the breakage of this energy-rich bond, ADP is called as battery without charge. So this is all you are supposed to give in the short note on ATP. Very easy, isn't it? Students, we already know that in our food we are consuming carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, that is fats, vitamins and minerals as well as water. Now what happens to carbohydrates in food? That also we have already studied in digestion. We know that carbohydrates in food, they undergo digestion in our digestive system, and then glucose is formed. Glucose enters circulation, that is, it enters the blood, inside the plasma. And when the blood is circulated throughout the body, it reaches all the cells of our body. Now this glucose is going to provide us the energy that we require for the various processes such as running, jogging, exercising, etc. But only eating food and only presence of glucose are not going to give us energy. The glucose has to be oxidized and then only energy will be released. How this glucose is oxidized, that is shown in this figure. Glucose is oxidized in the body in 3 steps. Number 1, glycolysis. Number 2, intermediate step. And number 3 is Krebs cycle. But today, let us first study the glycolysis followed by the intermediate step. Now here we have written that glucose enters cytoplasm through the cell membrane. Glucose is a soluble substance, soluble in water, and not only that, it can penetrate through the cytoplasmic membrane and therefore it reaches the cytoplasm. Here I have shown the cell membrane or the cytoplasmic membrane of an animal cell. Through this membrane, the glucose has entered the cytoplasm. Now what will happen? Glycolysis, that is breaking down of glucose will take place. Now lysis means to break down and glycolysis means breaking down of glucose. This is a process of oxidation, but molecular oxygen is not required for glycolysis. Then you will ask me, how oxidation of glucose is taking place? How the glucose is broken down? Answer is simple. Oxidation in glycolysis takes place by removal of hydrogen, not by addition of molecular oxygen. And since molecular oxygen is not required in this step, this glycolysis process is present in aerobic respiration also and anaerobic respiration also. What are the end products of glycolysis? The end products are 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, 2 molecules of ATP, that is the direct currency, 2 molecules of NADH2, that is indirect currency, and 2 molecules of H2O. After producing these products and byproducts, this pyruvic acid thus formed enters the intermediate step. The process is called as acetylation. Acetylation means formation of acetyl, and it is done by removal of CO2 and removal of hydrogen. And this hydrogen is immediately picked up by NAD to form indirect currency NADH2. So you will see that in this intermediate step also molecular oxygen is not required and still the oxidation is taking place by removal of hydrogen. So acetyl is formed. Now this acetyl combines with coenzyme A, which is already present in the cytoplasm, and an unstable product called as acetyl CoA is formed, which gets entry inside the mitochondria. Now the fate of acetyl CoA in Krebs cycle is another thing to be wondered at, that we will be doing in the TCA or Krebs cycle. So let's go in the next room to see what happens to this acetyl CoA. Come. Now students, after covering the glycolysis and the intermediate step, let us come on the second step in aerobic respiration. The second step in aerobic respiration is called as TCA or Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle. Oh my, three names have been given to it. And why this cycle is known by three names, that we will come to know at the end of this short note. So here is that figure of Krebs cycle. What a huge figure. Students, I have drawn this huge figure so that from distance also you can see the figure very well. Now what is given in the figure? Here is the cytoplasmic membrane. That means the outer boundary of the animal cell. Naturally, just inside this cytoplasmic membrane, the semi-fluid substance is called as the cytoplasm. And in the cytoplasm, we have what? Many cell organelles, and one such cell organelle I have enlarged and I have drawn one such cell organelle. It is called as mitochondrion. Plural is mitochondria. Now this mitochondria, as we can see, it has got a boundary of two membranes. This is the outer membrane of the mitochondria and it is smooth, while the inner membrane of mitochondria is folded to form finger-like structures. These finger-like structures are called as crista. We already know that. Now, at the end of intermediate stage, we know that acetyl CoA is formed in the cytoplasm. Now it gains entry inside the mitochondria. And this coenzyme A part is only helping the acetyl to get entry inside the mitochondria. As soon as acetyl CoA enters mitochondria, the role of coenzyme A is over. उसका काम खाली इतना था कि एसिटाइल ग्रुप को हाथ पकड़ के माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया में खींच के लाना, वो काम तो अब हो गया. So acetyl CoA has got entry, but now coenzyme A उसका काम हो जाने के कारण वापस चला गया है साइटोप्लाज्म में, where it will be recycled once again. So what is present now inside the mitochondria is only the acetyl part, and this acetyl part is going to get entry in the TCA cycle. Now we come on TCA cycle. See this cycle. It has got many tricarboxylic acids as intermediate products, and that is why it is called as tricarboxylic acid cycle. So now we know the meaning of TCA, right students? Good. So now only the acetyl part is going to enter the TCA cycle. Now right in the beginning, it will combine with oxaloacetic acid, which is again a tricarboxylic acid. And then the first product that is formed inside this TCA cycle is citric acid. That is why this particular TCA cycle is also known as citric acid cycle. Now, when citric acid is formed, remember it is an intermediate but first product. H2O, molecule of H2O will be removed from it. As well as CO2 also will be removed from it. And not only that, it will be giving out hydrogen also, which will be readily accepted by NAD, converting it into NADH2, and FAD, converting FAD into FADH2. So what are the products of this TCA cycle? H2O given out as byproduct, CO2 given out as byproduct, FADH2 and NADH2 are the main products in the form of indirect currency. Now this TCA cycle doesn't require molecular oxygen. Remember students, even in glycolysis and even in intermediate step which followed glycolysis, molecular oxygen was not required. But still, this process is called as oxidation process because hydrogen is removed here, which is accepted immediately by NAD and FAD to form NADH2 and FADH2, the indirect currency. Now only one thing remains. Why is it called as Krebs cycle? Very easy students. Krebs was the scientist who first stated that such a cycle is taking place in the mitochondria. Not only that, he has named all the intermediate tricarboxylic acids formed in TCA cycle. Fortunately, for 10th standard syllabus, we don't have to by heart the names of the intermediate acids. Only two names are sufficient. Oxaloacetic acid and the first product is citric acid. Easy, isn't it? Now students, let us cover the last step in aerobic respiration. This is called as ETC or ETS or respiratory chain or terminal oxidation. My 4 names for a single question, but very easy to remember. So let us try to understand it first. Now we know that food has has to be oxidized first for energy release. So that becomes our first point. Then in the second point, we are going to write that in glycolysis, intermediate step and PCA, oxidation is taking place, but it is not due to addition of molecular oxygen, but it is due to removal of hydrogen, which is called as dehydrogenation. So in short, how have we written? In these three, that is glycolysis, intermediate step and PCA, there is biological oxidation, molecular oxygen is not needed, oxygen or oxidation is done by removal of hydrogen, and this process is called as dehydrogenation. Now, we have to see what happens to that hydrogen which is removed. The hydrogen splits. उसके दो टुकड़े होते हैं, protons 2H plus and electrons 2E minus. Now these electrons are immediately accepted by certain electron acceptors which are present in the mitochondria. And which are those electron acceptors? NAD, FAD are the electron acceptors. So the electrons which have come out of the hydrogen part, they will be transferred from one electron acceptor to another, from that electron acceptor to another. Right? So the electrons are passed in a sequence, and this part is called as electron transfer chain or electron transfer system. And since this is taking place in respiration, it is also called as respiratory chain. Now only one name remains, and that is terminal oxidation. We will see what is the meaning of terminal oxidation. But before that, let us complete this point. We have stated that electrons are passed on from one electron acceptor to another, right? Now, electron acceptors undergo alternate reduction and oxidation, that is redox reaction. What is this redox reaction? Very easy. Look at this. NAD is the electron acceptor. It is reduced, that is reduction takes place because it is accepting electrons, and it will be converted into NADH2. NADH2 will lose electron. That is called as oxidation. And in this reaction, 3 ATP molecules were yielded. Yielded means given up. Now what happens to FAD? FAD is another electron acceptor. Same manner it behaves. The only difference is at the end. That is, FAD accepts electrons. That means reduction is taking place in FAD. FAD will be converted into FADH2. FADH2 will lose electron. That is, oxidation of FADH2 will take place, and 2 ATP molecules will be yielded. So NADH2 will turn into 3 ATP molecules, and FAD converted into FADH2, and FADH2 is going to give you only 2 ATP molecules. This is the only difference between NAD and FAD. Right? Now, this part we have already covered because these electrons are passed on from one electron acceptor to another. What happens to protons? Oxygen is the last electron acceptor. So it will accept the electrons also as well as protons, that is 2H plus. And it will be forming water out of it. So this is called as terminal oxidation. Yani last step in oxidation. So this is it, children. Very easy. Once you remember only these 4 points. Children, after finishing the E.T.S., let us summarize what we have learned up till now. We have learned that inside food there is trapped energy, and this energy has to be released by the oxidation process. And the entire oxidation process shows 3 main steps. Number 1 is glycolysis or EMP pathway. Then glycolysis is followed by intermediate step. After intermediate step, we know that there is TCA cycle or citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle. And the end step, the last step is E.T.S. or E.T.C. or terminal oxidation. We also know that the glycolysis takes place in cytoplasm. Intermediate step takes place in cytoplasm. And the next 2 steps, that is TCA and E.T.S, takes place in mitochondria. Now, huge amount of energy is released in this process. From glycolysis to E.T.S, we will find that 38 ATP molecules are created. Out of which only 2 molecules are created in glycolysis. Right? This is our summary. Now 38 huge amount of ATP is released and huge amount of release of energy is required by higher living beings like us because we are showing so many activities. But there are certain living beings which cannot live in presence of oxygen. So here at the end, that is in E.T.S, molecular oxygen is required. So this entire process cannot take place in living beings which live in the atmosphere where there is no oxygen. But glycolysis can take place in them because glycolysis doesn't require molecular oxygen, right? So this particular process where in E.T.S molecular oxygen is required is called as aerobic respiration. But in living beings which are not living in presence of oxygen, another type of respiration has to take place, and that is called as anaerobic respiration. So in what type of living beings anaerobic respiration, that is respiration without the presence of molecular oxygen, is taking place, that we are going to see now. The bacteria which cannot survive in presence of oxygen. Or some parts of living beings. Their living beings may belong to higher category. But sometimes what happens, there is depletion of oxygen level, and the jivecha, that is will to survive in the cells of these animals and plants, it's so great that even in absence of oxygen for a short while, these cells which belong to higher category living beings, they can perform respiration in absence of oxygen. So there are some cells in our body like muscle cells. If we are doing very rigorous exercise and there is less amount of oxygen in the surrounding, then also our muscle cells try to respire in absence of oxygen or in less amount of oxygen. Then there are certain seeds which are germinating. Look at this now. This is the soil. Soil is made up of several soil particles. And this is the germinating seed. Germinating, trying to germinate. म्हणजे त्याला कोंब फुटायला लागले, but still it is inside the soil. Now what happens? Sometimes at this stage there is heavy rainfall. And this whole soil will be filled up by water. So naturally the seed in this submerged soil is not going to get oxygen. So for a short while, this seed also shows the ability to survive, the ability to respire even in absence of oxygen. बघा त्यांची जीवेच्छा म्हणजे will to survive is so high that this poor seed is overcoming all the hurdles in front of it and germination will take place. So in absence of oxygen also, there are certain living beings which can respire to release the energy. And that type of respiration is called as anaerobic respiration. Now, anaerobic respiration will show only glycolysis as the first step, and pyruvic acid will be formed. We know that in glycolysis, 2 ATP molecules are created. So even in anaerobic respiration, 2 ATP molecules are created in glycolysis. But afterwards, aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration are totally different. So ATP molecule creation stops there. So in anaerobic respiration, only 2 molecules in glycolysis will be created. So here we are going to continue with our anaerobic respiration. Now, glucose has undergone glycolysis just as was the case in aerobic respiration, and pyruvic acid has formed. So here, after glycolysis, glycolysis has occurred, pyruvic acid is created. Now this pyruvic acid is not going to enter intermediate state, not going to show TCA, Krebs cycle or ETS. Then what is going to happen to it? It will be acted upon by various enzymes. And depending upon in which cell this process is occurring, the products are going to be also different. When the pyruvic acid is acted upon by various enzymes, the process is called as fermentation. And if the fermentation is taking place due to yeast cells, the product is going to be alcohol. म्हणजे दारू in Marathi. If the fermentation is going to take place in various microbes, then the product is vitamins and vinegar. And if the fermentation is going to take place in our erythrocytes, means red blood cells and muscle cells, then the product is going to be lactic acid. Now, due to lactic acid creation in our muscle cells, when we are doing strenuous exercise in surrounding where there is less amount of oxygen, then we get fatigued very soon. एकदम tired हो जाते हैं, and then we suffer from cramps. So depending on the cells which are showing fermentation, the products differ. And in the next question, that is the significance of fermentation, we have to give the same points. Significance of fermentation, number 1, if it is yeast, alcohol is produced. If the cells are of various microbes, then vitamins and vinegar is produced. Here I have made a mistake in spelling vinegar. respiration is taking place in erythrocytes and muscle cells, lactic acid is produced. So this covers the significance of fermentation also. Very easy, isn't it? Now the last point. In anaerobic respiration, only 2 ATP molecules are created, while in case of aerobic respiration, 38 ATP molecules were created. So, all these points we have already discussed. But how to give the difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration? Very easy. I am going to give you ready-made note because it is definitely going to come in your paper. So students, we have already seen that whether it is aerobic respiration or anaerobic respiration, it takes place inside a cell, either cytoplasm or the mitochondria, but inside the cell, right? So all these steps in aerobic as well as anaerobic respiration, they are called as cellular level respiration. So, respiration at cellular level, it is composed of all the steps in aerobic respiration, plus all the steps under anaerobic respiration. Right? Now, what is body level respiration? Very easy, students. See, we are inhaling oxygen from the atmosphere and we are exhaling, throwing out carbon dioxide in atmosphere. So ये जो देवान घेवान between our surrounding and our body is happening, O2 taken in, CO2 given out, is called as body level respiration. So, in this, we are going to write O2 taken in and CO2 given out. So, we have already completed respiration at body level, intake and outtake of different gases like O2 and CO2 is called as respiration at body level. And respiration at cellular level means all those steps starting from glycolysis onwards, which are taking place in aerobic as well as anaerobic respiration. Now students, we have come to the end of second chapter. And as our practice is, after every chapter, we are going to give one exam or worksheet. So, in the next episode, that is episode number 10, you are going to find a worksheet number 2 or exam paper number 2 on chapter number 2. But for it, you should be ready with chapter number 2. So again revise all the episodes after our worksheet 1. And then come prepared for the test. Please remember that getting good marks is going to create a great confidence in you. And this confidence is going to help you in the final 10th standard exam. Don't forget to use your earphones, and whenever possible, try to catch hold of your father's laptop for seeing the episodes of Tension Not series. Take care of yourself, that is most important. Love you children. Bye.
हाँ चल के तुझे मैं लेके चलूं एक ऐसे गगन के तले जहाँ गम भी न हो आंसू भी न हो बस प्यार ही प्यार पले एक ऐसे गगन के तले